10:01, so we will go ahead and get started with our presentation today. Just a big welcome to everyone for joining us today as we talk about the process of completing the Fixed Price Food Service Management Company RFP. Allie, do you want to go to the next slide? Just some housekeeping for today's presentation. We would like you to type your name and email in the chat box, if you would, please. Mute your microphone, turn your camera on if you would like. It's nice to be able to put a face with a voice because we will be working with you throughout the process of preparing your RFP and securing your food service management company contract. If you have any questions, you can certainly enter them into the chat box or unmute and ask your questions during the presentation. And we will be answering questions at the end of the presentation today from the chat box. So please feel free, any questions you have, don't be afraid to ask. Next slide. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you haven't already experienced or feel as you have surfed the COVID-19 tidal wave from the unanticipated school closure last year in March, and then everything that has transpired this year and continues to transpire. And so kudos to everyone for keeping the learning going. Next slide. So you've had a lot on your plate with keeping that learning going. And today's, preparation of the RFP is to get you prepared to complete the RFP to rebid your food service management company contract, or if this is something that you're new to, that you want to pursue a contract, we are going to go through in detail. But first, it's important to talk about COVID from the school food service perspective. There's been over 70 USDA child nutrition response waivers. Some were issued initially, then extended, and most have now been re-extended. What's important to know is currently the end date for the USDA waivers is June 30th, 2021. So that is the end of this school year. You are preparing the RFP for school year 21-22, which starts July 1st. And so at this point, we do not know if any of the waivers will be re-extended again. So what's most significant about those child nutrition response waivers that you need to know? Well, it gave the opportunity for our schools, our SFAs, to operate the summer food service program in school year 19-20 and now into school year 2021. And what that means is all students eat free of charge regardless of their income eligibility. Unprecedented that all students can eat free. That's huge. That it's been extended nationwide.
Sean,
yes.
Bill let us know that they can't see the slides, so I'm going to try to reshare this.
Sure.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry at the same time.
I'm sure you all are familiar with technical difficulties.
Can you see it now?
I can see it fine.
Yep, we can see it now. I've been able to see it here also, so
okay.
Maybe limited.
Okay, well, let me know if you have any other problems. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Allie. So I was on the first bullet and I talked about how that was unprecedented. Never's happened that all students can eat free. Amazing. That you can provide meals to students learning on-site, remote, or in some sort of hybrid situation, maybe in school 2 days a week, off-site 3 days a week.
There's one in the,
And then the third bullet is, of course, that the summer food service program has a higher rate of federal reimbursement per meal type versus the school meals program. And so additional revenue into the school meals account. And so in the blue, I've included what that difference is between the summer program and the school meals program. And it's significantly higher, the rates of reimbursement under the summer program. So next slide. Well, what this means is that why you are here with us today is either it's the fourth and final renewal year of your current food service management contract, or you've expressed interest in outsourcing your food service for next school year. Food service authorities, schools, are required to rebid this year if they're choosing to continue to contract with a food service management company. And currently there's no exceptions or flexibilities that have been granted by the USDA National Office for extending contracts beyond this fourth renewal year. So that's where we're at right now, that currently we're moving forward. It is a difficult year to prepare your fixed price food service management company RFP, and we realize that. It's also a very difficult year for food service management companies to prepare their proposals with the uncertainty of what food service will look like next school year. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel with the new vaccinations that will be hopefully more available as we head into the summer months. And so I'm very hopeful that perhaps school will look much more normal, or what it's looked like in the past, and that your food service operation can return to more normal. So next slide. So let's introduce the food service team that works with our schools that contract with the food service management companies. Allie, who is our pilot today with our Zoom. She's located in the Lincoln office. We have Erica Arter with us today. She's in the Lincoln office. Myself, I'm Sean Von Drotchek. And then we have Laura Lutz, and Laura is located in our North Platte office. And those of you that are in the western part of the state are probably more familiar with working with Laura. She completes the first year reviews of the food service management company. And I've included our email addresses, which is just our first name dot last name at nebraska.gov. So this is your team. And moving to the next slide. Who will be your main contact this school year for your questions, submitting your fixed price food service management company RFP and contract? So I've included your school and who the program specialist is that will be working with you more directly, answering your questions, and who you will be submitting your information to. We work as a team, and so any information that you submit will be looked at by all of us, but this is your main contact for who to submit your information and ask your initial questions to. Next slide. So what's our agenda for today? We're going to be planning for what your food service operation may look like in the future. We're going to review the RFP document, the process, the information to complete, receiving and scoring proposals, and then submitting to nutrition services to your program specialist that's working with you, because the RFP has to be approved by our office. And I call it the RFP package because that includes all of your attachments, completed exhibits, charts. It all has to be approved by our office. And then, of course, the proposal that is accepted by your school, and then the resulting contract. So we're going to be discussing what your virtual pre-proposal meeting should look like, what necessary information you need to include as you plan for that. And then, of course, we'll answer any questions that you have later on. Next slide. So planning for school year 21-22 and beyond. As a reminder, this is a one-year contract with the option for 4 yearly renewals. The contract year begins July 1st and ends June 30th. And so what you need to be thinking about as you prepare the RFP is, what changes do you anticipate in your school district for the next 5 years? Because really, as I said, this is a one-year contract and it has the option for the 4 yearly renewals. So some things that you probably need to be thinking about as you plan ahead and gather information for the RFP is, will there be any new buildings? Will you have construction? Will you have remodels? Will you be changing any of your grade configurations? Any chance that if you have open campus now, you'll be going to closed campus? Will you be introducing any new programs such as preschool meals, the after-school care snack program? Do you anticipate operating any of your existing programs differently? So if you have the traditional breakfast, is there the possibility you might want to introduce a grab and go or after the bell breakfast? If you're not participating in farm to school, will you be implementing that in the future? Will you be doing beef to school, pork to school? So these are all things that in the next 5 years, be thinking about if that's something that your district wants to include in the RFP, because if it's not in the original RFP, then it could result in what we call a material change to the contract, which would require a rebid. So going through this process again. So that's why it's so important to think ahead. And we will guide you through that also as we receive your RFPs. So next slide, Allie. So do your research, gain information. USDA has a great publication on contracting with food service management companies, guidance for school food authorities. It was sent in our email communication to your school announcing the Zoom. It can also be sent to you if you just contact your program specialist if you can't locate it. I know that you probably have a zillion emails and finding something is difficult. So we'd be glad to send it to you. You can also just Google it, the name of it, and it'll come up and you can look at it. It is a great publication because it goes through all of the required components of the RFP, which we've included in the RFP document. But because your school receives federal dollars through participation in the child nutrition programs, you have to follow all of the federal regulations. And so that is why the document is so long that you've received is because we've included all of those regulations in the document for you. Next slide. Another thing that I would suggest doing is to contact other districts, school food authorities with food service management company contracts. That list is provided to you on page 96 and 97 of the RFP. Currently, we have 40 SFAs, districts, with food service management company contracts. We have 5 companies that operate currently in Nebraska, and we have 4 companies that have contacted the state agency and have expressed interest in operating in Nebraska. And those are all included on the handout or on the document on page 96, 97 of the RFP. But, you know, it's good to contact other districts that have other companies to see, you know, what they think of how that company is operating in their district. And so I encourage you to do that. You're probably not going to have the opportunity to do on-site visits to those schools, but I'm sure if you contact the superintendent or the business manager at those schools, they can give you some feedback on how that company is operating in the district. Next slide. Well, there is good news. And the good news is we will not be reviewing all 103 pages of the RFP and contract, because as I've already mentioned, many of those pages are just the federal regulations that have to be in the RFP, that have to be followed. So not everything requires that we review it today, but you do need to be familiar with the RFP and the language in the RFP. So today we're going to just focus on those areas that may need some explaining. So if you had the opportunity to print your RFP, I would encourage you to pull it out now and take notes as we go along, and I will try my best to tell you what page of the RFP that we are talking about as we proceed. So let's go ahead and I'll have Allie pull up the actual RFP.
Okay, give me one moment. I just switch screens here.
And Erica, are there any questions in the chat that we can answer right now?
Let me check. I'm not seeing any yet.
Perfect. That's great news, because we must be explaining all this little parts, the intro, okay. Now when we get into the actual document, I'm sure there will be some more questions.
Can you see it now, Sean?
I can see it perfectly.
Okay, can everyone else see? Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So as we go through page 1 of the document, I want to explain that your SFA has an agreement with the Nebraska Department of Education Nutrition Services to operate the program in accordance with the federal regulations. So the agreement is between your school district and our office. You are pursuing a contract with a company to manage your food service operation. You still have responsibility for ensuring that those federal regulations are met. The Nebraska Department of Education has no agreement with your food service management company. So with that being said, This is a contract, and NDE strongly advises that districts consult with their own legal counsel as necessary in the preparation of the RFP and acceptance of the proposal. Because you are receiving federal dollars, our office has to approve the entire RFP package prior to proposal solicitation. So we provide you the template, and it is your responsibility to complete the template, RFP template, and submit it to our office prior to the notification that the RFP is out. So just a reminder of that process. And the SFA must submit the following items for review and approval to NDE after the district has selected a food service management company and before the contract is signed. We have to ensure that there's nothing in the proposal that is prohibitive. And so I'm not going to go through each one of those items that are listed in A through G. If you want to scroll down, Allie, or maybe if you actually want to make the page appear on the screen, maybe shrink it down a little bit. So
Just bear with me. Sorry.
I know.
Okay.
And if you're not able to, that's fine. Just scroll down. And then there's just some forms that have to be submitted to NDE. And so as we move on down to page number 2 of the RFP, we're going to go to the NDE RFP timeline, which is on the lower section of the page. Now, there's some important dates. We're already past the December 1st deadline, and the next deadline that you need to be aware of is the submission of the RFP package to NDE. We need to receive your RFP package by January 15th. We have this timeline in place so that we can ensure that you will have a contract in place by July 1st. So that is a deadline. That January 15th deadline does need to be met. Does your RFP package need to be perfect? No. We're going to work with you if there's areas that you are unclear of, or if you've done your best and you just didn't know what to put, then we're going to come back with you and work with you on the completion of that RFP package. So submit what you have as of January 15th, please. And then just be assured that you will be receiving assistance. And then the next date that is really important is that July 1st. We need to have a contract in place by July 1st. For those of you that are at the end of your 4th year renewal, your current contract ends June 30th. And so we want to ensure that you have a new contract in place on July 1st. Next page. And so legal notice is just where you put the name of your school in on page 3. And just a reminder that you can go out for bid, you can solicit proposals once your committee reviews those proposals. If you make the decision that you want to either continue self-operated or return to self-operations, you certainly can do that. It's just that it's in the best best interest of the district on what decision they make after they receive their proposals. So moving on down. And we are now on page 4. So additional information required to adequately respond to the request for proposal may be obtained from who is going to be the contact person at your school for receiving proposals. And just a reminder that if any company asks the question, that all information has to be provided to any food service management company that attends your pre-proposal meeting. And we will talk more about the pre-proposal meeting later in the presentation. But it's important that once that solicitation notification appears in the newspaper, then everyone has to be, and every company has to be informed of any questions asked or any answers provided by the district. The SFA reserves the right to retain all proposals. So if you receive 3 proposals from food service management companies, those are retained by the district. They're not returned to the food service management company. And we have had companies request that their proposals be returned. Once they are received by the district, they're essentially public information. So let's talk about the procurement method. We utilize only the fixed price RFP contract. That was emailed to you in the email notifications about this Zoom meeting. The rest of it just outlines the process. And so I just want to emphasize the process and everything you need to know is in the RFP document. That is why it's so important for you to be familiar with the document, because we've really tried to include everything you need to know about the process in the actual document. Next page. The timeline. Because this is so contingent on when you get us the information, the need for clarification of the information submitted, that on page 5 of the document, we ask that you wait to put in dates, because we have found in the past those dates changed, because it's a back and forth with our office. We have to ensure that you are creating a very clear picture of your district so that all food service management companies that receive that RFP package can have a clear picture of what their proposal needs to be. And so it is a back and forth. And so on 5, wait on adding dates. I certainly think that if you have a date in mind of when this needs to go to your Board of Education, you can put that date in. So in my example, I've included the May board meeting, that I want this as an agenda item, that we've accepted a proposal and I want board approval. So that date can be indicated on page 5. So as we move on down to the next page, there is a mandatory virtual pre-proposal meeting that is required. You know, you are creating the picture within the RFP of the needs of your district, but the companies actually need to see the operation. the layout, the buildings, the serving areas, how students proceed through the lines, equipment, so that they can make that very accurate proposal. So there is a mandatory virtual pre-proposal meeting that you will need to conduct. And Allie, once again, will be going through that in much more detail. The timeline, because questions are going to be asked by food service management companies, we do have some last dates and response dates. So the last date for food service management companies to submit written questions regarding the RFP is approximately 30 calendar days prior to proposal submission.
Hey,
And we ask that
Sean,
you,
this is Paul Bostalka from West Holt. I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you, but I have a question about the virtual meeting. Is that okay?
sure, of course.
Considering if things go in a positive direction as far as COVID goes, and we're getting into a spot where we do not, as a school, feel uncomfortable with a vendor coming in to view our processes with masks on, and we don't have concerns about them coming to our school, does it have to be virtual, or can we make it something that's not?
We're asking that that each pre-proposal meeting that you are planning your pre-proposal meeting, that it is virtual, because companies have contacted our office because they're not comfortable going into a school, and schools aren't comfortable having visitors. And even though you may be, for consistency and for all vendors to be presented the same information so it's fair, we're asking that pre-proposal virtual meetings be conducted this school year.
Okay, so then the way I understand it, though, is that they have to see the operations of our school. So I would assume you are recommending we do that on a cell phone. Like if we're doing a Zoom, we do it on a cell phone or an iPad where we are able to be mobile and demonstrate it. And I guess the other thing is if we've never done that before. I mean, the last time I did it, honestly, the only company that showed up is mine, so I don't worry about it. But I was told to ask.
Yes.
But if someone else shows up, or someone else, I mean, they may attend a virtual meeting far before they drive to Atkinson. So, I mean, I don't know.
Another good reason to have the virtual meeting is
Right, but
that,
I don't
yeah.
know what they're going to want to see, and so
Well, we're going to help you with that.
okay.
When we get to what it needs to look like later on in the presentation, we're going to help you with that. We're going to talk a lot more about how to conduct a virtual meeting.
Sounds good. I'll let you continue then. I appreciate the response.
Sure, of course.
I have issues with only doing virtual also. It allows for all of them to be able to do this without commuting to our place. And if they're willing to commute to our school, that gives us, the meaning of they're just not in it to, number one, train somebody on how to do this. They're just, the last time I did this, I went through a company, they came, all this stuff. Turns out they were just training somebody, and they were not very nice.
I'm sorry to hear that, Jennifer.
I think this, it makes them come. It makes them, I mean, we're allowing different schools, we're allowing activities to participate. Why not a few people for our RFP?
Well, we're going to stick with a pre-proposal virtual meeting. And we are in a pandemic. And you know, we don't know what it's going to be like in March or April. And so things could get a lot worse. Not, you know, I hate to be Debbie Downer,
Oh, yeah.
but we are planning now for what may happen. And we're going to go with, yes, pre-proposal virtual meeting. And I understand what everyone is saying, but I think safety always comes first. So thank you for your comments. I had also heard some of this, but I also have heard the flip side, as I said, from companies. And it's, you know, are you allowing, so maybe some of you are allowing visitors into your school, but I have to tell you, we are not doing any on-site reviews this school year. And that is coming down from our Commissioner of Education that, you know, we are not. So moving on, we'll move on with the RFP document. And so once again, we're back to the last date for the food service management company to submit written questions regarding the RFP. So they need to get the questions into you so that you have ample time to respond. And that's approximately 15 days from when proposals are due. And so we're waiting on those dates. Complete the part where, who do they send these questions to? Is it the superintendent? Is it the finance? Is it business manager? So once again, written communication will override any verbal communication between a food service management company and SFA. Everything should be in writing so that there is no chance of inaccurate information being distributed. And you want time to think about some of those questions that come in. So written communication, questions in writing, answers in writing. So as we move on down, how many copies do you want submitted? You need an electronic copy. This is where you can say how many hard copies you want. We say 2 in the RFP. If you need more, then you would indicate that. Moving on down. Want to talk about using the forms provided. No other documents submitted with the RFP contract will affect the contract provisions, except where clarification is needed. Then that clarification needs also to be in writing. We have an Exhibit F in the document that allows the opportunity to include any additional services that we haven't already addressed in the RFP document. Moving on down. You need to be checking the suspended or debarred, the excluded parties list, part of the system of awards management. That's included in the RFP. They will be signing documentation also in the RFP. So that is something that's required by USDA, and there is documentation in the actual RFP that ensures that. We talk a lot about exhibits, and we'll be going through the exhibits. We want to talk about award criteria. You need to be thinking about who is going to be on your committee to review the proposals that are received. Needs to have at least 2 members, and they will be scoring the RFP. And we will go through that in a little bit more detail. And please read through this section. It helps you determine who might be on that committee. And so your responsibility of who's on the committee, who you assign. Just be aware that scoring sheets are submitted to our office. And that is something that is submitted with the selected proposal. Moving on down, we're on page 9. We're moving on down to page 10. You are responsible, Allie, go up a little bit. You are responsible for determining your award criteria. Just be aware that cost must have the highest number of assigned points. And so in my example here, and it is simply just an example, is that cost is awarded 30 points, service capacity is 25, then you assign the rest or whatever you determine. In the past, we've had some schools put in some pretty wacky point value where it's been like 27 maybe for cost and like 18 for finance. You want to put in a point value that you will be able to assign. So just be aware of that. Once again, cost must have the highest number of points. Moving on down. And I should say that for each one of those identified areas that you will be scoring, there is detailed information on page 12, 13, and 14 of the RFP that the company has to include in their proposal. And that is for the company to ensure that that's included because of the categories that they will be scored on. Late proposals, dates are very important. Proposals have to be submitted on the day and time indicated in the RFP. Maybe down to attachment J, if you want to scroll down a little bit, or not attachment J. Final contract, just what's included. The RFP becomes the contract. The attachments, charts, exhibits are all part of the RFP. The proposal becomes part of the contract. There is no separate contract. It is the RFP, all of the documents submitted by the food service management company. That is the contract. Moving on down. In the RFP on page 15, you will indicate what programs you are currently operating at your school. And it's not just necessarily programs, it's what services are you currently doing. And so we have quite an extensive list of all of the different programs and services that are provided within a school. And so this is a completed example that this, my example is for a school that participates in a lot of things. And I'm sure that is true for many of you, that you do a lot of things that are food service related, not only programs, but services. My particular example, Ven's Meals. They sell meals to a private school and to a childcare. That has to be included in the RFP because that is part of what the food service does. And so as we scroll on down that page, this particular school already does farm to school. They do beef to school. They have milk break. Milk break is a non-reimbursable program, but it's important for companies to know that you're doing milk break because it's billed as a la carte or it's billed as milk. So it's a separate item that would be billed for. This particular school has a school store. So important to know, it has open campus for 11 to 12. It has second chance breakfast offered to high school after first period. And those students eat in the classroom. So then on page 16, this helps you think about what other programs and services do you anticipate offering in the next 5 years. If you're not currently doing it, are there any plans, any thoughts of doing it in the next 5 years? And I would encourage you to, if you're not for sure, mark it anyway. Because once again, if it is not marked in the RFP, it could require a rebid of the contract and going through this process again. So if there's any potential for adding a program, even if you have no date in mind, make sure that box is marked. So if we go up the screen a little bit, Allie, look, I've marked, and it's not marked, but it should be, vended meals provided to. There's the potential that this school might add additional private schools and daycares. And so they've indicated that. Nothing concrete, but there's that potential. They're already doing it. So maybe in the future, someone else will approach them for vended meals. This school did beef to school, but now they're going to have a school garden greenhouse. And so they've indicated that as a future service, and how that might influence the food service would be those products could be used in the food service operation. So moving on down. On page 18 of the document is where you indicate if there's additional food service that would be outside of the program. So that would be like providing food for teacher and service days, for banquets, parties, meetings, non-reimbursable snack for like a preschool that operates. So that needs to be indicated if that is something that the district is requesting, because that is billed outside of the contract. It's billed to the organization that is requesting this service. And so that's included. There's information in M that talks about that. And then we're going to move on to page 22. Special dietary needs. This needs to be indicated in the RFP if the SFA is wanting the food service management company to provide fluid milk substitutes for students who request a substitution. Now, if there is a medical statement that requires a substitution, then that has to be done. But this is a request. This request could come from a parent or a student that maybe they get an upset tummy when they drink fluid milk, and they're requesting a substitute that has the same nutritional composition as cow's milk. A school is not required to do that because it doesn't rise to a special diet. It's just a request. And so it's important for the district to let the company know if that is something that they need to do, because there is an additional cost for those substitutes. And so that additional cost is figured into that fixed price that they will be proposing back to the district. Moving on to the next slide. We're moving to page 24, if you're following along. Purchases. The SFA must check one of the purchasing options stated below. The SFA will do all purchasing for the food service program, which is highly unlikely because that is why you are entering into a fixed price food service management company. And a fixed price food service management company is one fixed price per meal type. So a different price for breakfast, a different price for lunch that includes everything for the operation of the program: labor, food, disposables, chemicals, all of those things are included in that fixed price. There may be some items that the district will continue to purchase, and so that is outlined in Exhibit D, Chart 8, that needs to be completed. But this is where you indicate that you will be doing that. You will be completing Exhibit D. Moving on down to page 25. This is USDA foods, the commodities that your district receives. It's called USDA foods. And in the version that was initially sent of the RFP, some of the boxes were not pre-marked. In the version that we're going through today, that was sent in the Zooms, the last 2 Zoom reminders, the boxes are marked. And so if the version you have in front of you is not marked, you will want to ensure that you are marking these boxes. And essentially every box is marked because we want to check all that may or could apply. Moving on down to page 28, we want to talk about employees. The SFA must designate if the current SFA employees will be retained by the SFA or be subject to employment by the food service management company. This is a very important section. For those of you that have existing food service management company contracts, if anything needs to change with this new contract, it needs to be indicated here. For those of you that are outsourcing your food service for the first time or preparing your RFP, you need to be thinking through, what about food service staff? Will they be employed by the SFA? Will they be employed by the food service management company? Or will it be a combination of both? A company has to know what's happening with employees, once again, to calculate the correct fixed prices that they're proposing back to the district. Moving on down to page 29. Is your district willing to accept a shared food service director? You know, typically we're talking for most of our districts that outsource their food service, they want a full-time on-site director, not shared with any other SFAs. But because of it can influence the fixed price if the district is willing to share a director, the district needs to indicate which is their preference, or if they're willing to accept proposals for both a full-time and an on-site. And that would be a separate fixed price would be proposed for each type of situation. The food service management company, if the district has marked a shared director, must indicate in their proposal the minimum number of hours that food service director is guaranteed to be on site weekly, and what other districts that food service director will be shared with. So want to draw your attention. I know Some of you, most of you have been through this process before, and 5 years ago was a long time ago, and this RFP is not the same RFP that you did 5 years ago. The federal rules and regs haven't changed drastically. We've updated any new regulations, but in the last 5 years, this has become something that has happened. And so we've included it in the RFP to ensure that as a district, you're getting what you expect and what that fixed price includes. So moving on down to page 33. Financial terms, the food service management company shall submit separate billing for special functions conducted outside of the nonprofit school food service account. That is where we talked about if the district is going to be requesting food service for parties, banquets, teacher in service days. And then I just want to highlight meal equivalency factor at the bottom of the page, Allie, number 6, if you want to scroll. There's a fixed price for breakfast, lunch, after school snack, the summer food service program, for most programs. But for a la carte sales and adult meals, those sales are converted into meals, and there is a meal equivalency factor that is used to do that calculation. And so what that meal equivalency factor is for the current year is $3.97. And so we provide that information. It is the free rate of reimbursement, the state match, and then the current value of entitlements provided by the USDA Foods Office. And so that's where that number comes from. And we provide, as I said, that information for all annual renewals, what that equivalency factor, because it goes up every year. Moving on to the next is that the companies will, in their proposal, will submit a fee per meal, a fixed price per meal. And so this is not a form that you complete, but this is a form that has to be submitted by the company so that you can determine the cost, okay? How many points to assign to cost. And so once again, this is completed by the food service management company. This is their proposal back to you on the cost. Moving on down, Allie. We provide, the contract can only increase by a determined value for each renewal. And so that's defined in the RFP, and it happens to be the food away from home series of the consumer price index for all urban consumers for the time period of May through May. And we provide that to you in the renewal document. If you've ever looked at the consumer price index, it can be very confusing to determine what that is. And so we provide that number for any fee increases on an annual basis for the renewal. Moving on down. Guarantee. And we are on page 36, if you're following along on your paper copy. Indicate is if SFA is requesting a guarantee. So is your district going to request a guarantee? A guarantee is that positive balance in the school food service account. If you are not requesting a guarantee, one will not probably be provided to you in proposals. Okay, so it might be wise to mark the second box that the SFA is requesting the Food Service Management Company propose a guarantee. And depending upon where the account is currently, that may not be that may be difficult for a company, but you do want to ensure that you are guaranteed a positive gain for the program. And it is the responsibility of the company to provide that information. So you will not be completing what your expectation is. The company will be providing what they anticipate for the guaranteed positive gain. So want to explain that a little bit. I hope that's clear. Moving on down. We are now on page 39. Insurance. The SFA must evaluate and determine acceptable insurance limits for this section. And this may be where you want to check with the attorney or dependent on your district, whoever you need to check with. We've provided some information about what is standard or what we have seen for coverage, but there are blanks in the document if that is not what your district does. So you can leave the, if it is what your district does, then you don't need to complete the blanks, but if it's different, then you do. So once again, looking at insurance, and we're going to move down to page 41. Equipment. Financing of equipment. And Allie, you can scroll down just a little bit more so they can see that. Non-expendable equipment would be like your capital equipment, your items that are expensive. It's not small equipment like dishers, scoops, those types of things. We're talking expendable equipment like steam jacketed kettles or ovens, refrigerators. And because this is a one-year contract, if you expect the company to purchase any of those items, then you have to outline what's going to happen to that equipment. And that's at the bottom of the page, Allie, if you want to scroll up just a little bit more. Let's say you would not renew your contract with a company and go back to self-op. What that equipment would have to be turned over to the company, or you would have to purchase it. And so as we go back up the page, Allie, you may find it wise that the district purchase all non-expendable equipment because it is then the district's equipment and you don't have to worry about what to do with it if you would decide not to continue contracting with a company. So page 44 is our next page we want to talk about. USDA waivers. This is a new section because of COVID and what it has done or what USDA's response has been to assist schools, particularly in the food service aspects. And so this is a new section. I'm not going to go through it. I do encourage you to read it. We've tried to do our best to say that all current waivers as of the date this RFP was released are set to expire June 30th. These waivers may or may not impact one or more provisions contained in this contract. So that is just saying, you know, if they would be extended, then the company has to abide by any of those waivers. Well, it's the district's responsibility because these are waivers. Districts have the option of not opting in. But if the district expects the company to, it's covered in this area of USDA waivers. And then page 45 of the document is the signature page. This page is not completed until after the proposal has been reviewed by our office and any clarification to the proposal. And so this page is not signed until that point. And the contract value at the bottom of the page, Allie, if you want to go a little bit lower in the document, isn't completed until it's signed. So the value of the contract. And then we're moving on. Go ahead. Now, some programs, such as the Summer Food Service Program and the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, if you participate in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, have particular regulations or responsibilities that are included in the RFP. And so that is something I wanted to mention, is that we've included the regulations and responsibilities under those regulations in Appendix A, B, and C. And so as we look at Appendix A for the Summer Food Service Program, which many of you are operating right now, just be aware that the company has to complete a bid bond and a performance bond if your school operates the Summer Food Service Program. And so that is something that is a company responsibility. And let's go on, Allie, to page 49, the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. As she scrolls down, you can see the bonding requirements are highlighted, just to bring your attention to that. And Appendix B is the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. This is a cost reimbursable program, and responsibilities of the Food Service Management Company, responsibilities of the SFA. And for those schools that went through the contracting process 5 years ago, this has changed a little bit. It's become more clear in this section about what costs can be submitted for reimbursement for the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. And then we are going to get into the exhibits, and I'm going to be turning it over to Erica Arter from our office to give you more insights on how to complete the exhibits charts.
Sean,
Erica,
I'm gonna actually stop sharing for a moment, and Erica's gonna pick up sharing the RFP. I need to take care of another technical piece. So just bear with us one moment while we switch screens to her.
Sure. And that'll give me a chance to look at the chat, or if any of you have any questions right now while we make this transition, now would be a great time. Oh gosh. I'm looking through. April asks if current contract ends June 30th and we do have a summer lunch program, is it possible one company will operate it? Oh, now I've lost my chat.
Oh, sorry.
Let me go back up. In June and a new company in July if we switch companies? Yes, April.
The current contract ends June 30th. If the district would make the decision to accept the proposal from another company, then there would be a transition July 1st to the new company. Has that happened? Yes, it has. And it's nothing that a company would not be familiar with. If we have several buildings and serving sites, how many sites should we try to show on a virtual tour? And we will be talking about that, but definitely one from each grade level, which would be elementary, middle, high school, and any alternative schools. There may be concerns with videotaping students and having that out there virtually, and we totally agree with that. And you would not be including students. And so your tour could be when students are not going through the line, and you could have someone, a staff person that is okay with being videotaped, demonstrate how the line progresses. Can SFAs elect to accept only electronic submission? The State Purchasing Bureau only accepts responses via share file. That would be something different than our companies are currently doing. If that's what state purchasing only accepts, then I guess that would clearly need to be expressed in Exhibit F of the RFP, where additional services requests are indicated. And it looks like Erica is ready to go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, and you can see
Looks great.
Exhibit A site information. Okay, so I'll start on page 51 of the RFP with Exhibit A site information. This chart here lists general data about each feeding site that should be completed by the SFA. On this chart, you need to list all feeding sites where food is prepared or eaten. Be sure to list any alternative feeding sites or vended locations here as well. So for example, if you vend meals to a daycare, include them on this chart. Or if the pre-K eats separately in the classroom, make sure to list the pre-K separately here as well, as we have in our example. Another important column here is to indicate if the meals are prepared on site or if they will be prepared at a satellite location, and then if they'll be sent in bulk or as a pre-packaged unitized meal. And then another one, the column over on the right hand, the number of serving days. You want to be sure that this column is accurate because companies base their outcomes and guarantees on the number of serving days. So for example, maybe the pre-K only goes Monday through Thursday, and then they would have a different number of serving days for them versus say the middle and high school students. You can also add any additional information you think would be important for the food service management company to know in the additional information box. We've filled this out just as an example so you could see what information you might want to put in this box. Continuing on with Exhibit A, site information. This next chart is meant to be a snapshot picture of the services provided at each school or feeding site. Once again, you'll want to list all your locations where food is prepared or delivered, and make sure to include those alternative feeding sites and contracted or vended locations like daycares or private schools. The SFA must declare if the food service management company needs to provide contract meals. Contract meals are those meals served to other SFAs, other schools and child cares for which your school might have a vendor agreement with. Sean kind of already went over the morning and afternoon milk breaks, that those are non-reimbursable services that some schools provide. Make sure to list what grades those would be for down in the additional information comment section. And if food is being provided or purchased for any group on a regular basis, you can indicate that in the other column here and explain that in the additional information box. In this example, the Nebraska Christian School was requesting snack items for their after-school care program per the vendor agreement, and you wanted the FSMC to provide those. On this one, for this, all you need to do is you can print your sponsor and site applications for all the programs that you participate in. Those can be printed and found on the Nutrition Services CMP website. You'll want to label those as Exhibit A and include those as an attachment with the RFP. For Exhibit B, menus, you must submit 21 days worth of menus for each program the school participates in. And the food service management companies have asked that these menus for school lunch and for summer feeding be pre-COVID feeding menus, or your regular school lunch and your regular summer feeding menus before you started like the emergency COVID feeding. I think most schools started that around March. So maybe look back at your January or February 2020 menus. I did want to point out a common mistake we see here is people submit just 1 month's worth of menus, but that month doesn't have 21 feeding days in it. So you might need to submit 2 months worth of menus or a few extra days in order to get a full 21 days worth of feeding days and menus. Exhibit C is the food service budget. And once again, due to COVID feeding, the food service management companies have expressed that it's important to see how things operated in the food service account pre-COVID, as well as what is currently taking place right now. So you need to complete revenues and expenses for school years 18-19, pre-COVID, and then school year 19-20 when COVID started. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this budget line by line, but I do want you just to keep in mind that as you're filling this out, this section is something very important to food service management companies. So the more accurate and detailed and the better you can break down your expenses and revenue, just the better for you, and hopefully that will also help you get the best fixed price possible. On the sales information, you should be able to get this information from your POS software. And once again, try to break it down into the categories listed here. For reimbursement, the reimbursement section, you can get most of those figures from the reimbursement claims that have been submitted and paid by NDE on the CMP site. In the USDA Foods section, there's a USDA Foods line here, and then this USDA Foods section down here. That information, there's a link to the USDA Foods website, the CMP web, included in chart 6 of the RFP, which we'll be talking about here in just a minute. And that's where you can find that information to fill out that section. If you have questions or need additional information with that, you can also contact the DHHS Commodities Office or USDA Foods Office. Chad and Brian are the contacts there, and you're probably familiar with them, but they can help you with those numbers as well. For the district employees, if you pay any district staff out of the nonprofit food service account, this is obviously where you need to report those figures. And for the SFA direct expenses, if you have a fixed price contract, you can list the total paid to the company under contract labor and specify FSMC contract. Also be sure, to list any equipment repairs or any equipment purchased, and specify what those were for. And really just anything else kind of you can put here that was paid out of the food service account. You don't have to put something in every category of this budget, only those where you actually had a revenue and expense for. So some of it will depend on if you were self-operated, if you had a cost reimbursable contract previously, or if you had a fixed price contract previously. Will depend on which sections you need to fill out here. Also, part of Exhibit C is the this is on page 61, if you're following along, is the budget financial section, the revenues and expenses. We want you to also attach the annual financial report from school year 18-19 and school year 19-20, as well as your school board approved food service budget for the previous and current school year, and then your vendor paid list for purchases from the nonprofit food service account for the previous school year, July 1st through June 30th. This vendor paid.
I have a question on the annual financial report.
Yeah.
For 19-20. My
Yeah.
business manager said it won't be available until January.
Yeah, January, it comes out about, I think, around January 15th. So we'll work with you on that to see when it comes out and what needs to be included there.
Okay.
Just throw this in about AFRs.
Yeah.
All districts have already had to submit their AFRs. So there should be at each district level some form of an AFR that was submitted, and the state has already said they've accepted and so forth. Now, whether it's finally approved or not, are you looking for the approved AFR by the state? It's already been approved by the auditors.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, what usually we print them here from this website once they're available, and I think that's supposed to be around January 15th. But if it's not, then it sounds like what you have would be acceptable as well. So like I said, we'll just kind of work with you on that when we know when those are available.
Well, my thought is I would submit what was submitted because
That's fine. Yes. Yeah,
that's what they're going to approve. So
yeah, I think that would be acceptable. Thank you for that information. Exhibit D just is a list of the charts and attachments that need to be provided to all vendors along with your RFP when you send that out to the food service management companies. And then on page 63, chart 1A, the labor worksheet, this should be completed by the SFA. You want to list here any staff that have any food service responsibilities. Commonly, if you had a fixed price contract, a lot of times we'll see that there's still like a bookkeeper or a secretary that maybe does the POS or submits the monthly claims for reimbursement. Or if you were previously self-operated, this would also include all of the food service employees. Be sure to indicate if the person will continue to be retained by the school or the SFA for the term of the contract, and then indicate if they are paid from the general fund or if you pay their wages or part of their wages out of the nonprofit food service account. On page 65, chart 1C is the next one that needs to be completed by the school. And this, once again, is for any school food employees that are paid out of the nonprofit food service account.
can I ask just a quick question on that piece?
Yeah.
You know, we have that currently. myself included, we deal with nutrition fund items, but our compensation coding it's not coded to the nutrition fund. Are these the type of people you're talking about to make a, reasonable estimate of what the general fund is covering outside of the nutrition fund? I.e. general ledger? Well, they general ledger everything in the district, including the invoices for the food management. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chart 2A. This chart is the SFA specification worksheet on the average daily participation. And this you'll need to fill out, once again, due to COVID, for school year 18-19, school year 19-20, and school year 2021. This chart 2A is for breakfast, 2B is for, there's another one just like this, 2B for lunch, and then 2C is for snacks. So we just listed an example here of listing each feeding site or school, your average daily adult meals. So if you have any that you provide for free, and how many paid on average that you have each day of adult meals. If you sell any meals to other schools, the average numbers of meals per day, and then your average daily sales and a la carte sales at each feeding site as well. Chart 2D, basically just like it says here, attach the point of service reports, the student meal counts, a la carte sales, and adult meal counts for each feeding site for one full week in October for school year 18-19, 19-20, and 2021. And that information you should be able to get from your point of service software program. Chart 3 is the prices for student and adult meals. Most of you are probably providing free meals under the summer food service program right now during this school year, but we do want you to go ahead and list what you have charged, what you would have charged for paid students and adults for 2021, and then your projected prices for 21 and 22. Chart 4 is the SFA's charge policy. You want to just choose the option that best describes your charge policy, and that would be before COVID feeding, and list any alternate food items offered if applicable. And then also make sure up here to insert along with your attachments an actual copy of the SFA's charge policy so that the companies can read through that. Chart 5 is copies of reimbursement claims. Print copies of reimbursement claims from the CMP Nutrition Services CMP website for all programs that the school participates in for the current year, August through December, probably by the time you submit your RFP, and the prior 2 school years, school year 18-19 and school year 19-20. Those would be the full year, August through May. And make sure when you print those that you click on the summary view to show the site meal details so that it shows the number of free, reduced, and paid meals at each feeding site that you have. On these claims, the breakfast, lunch, after school snack, and special milk would all be on one claim. Also, don't forget to go into the summer feeding service program claims for all the months that you claimed meals through the SFSP instead of the school lunch program. And make sure you print those summer claims as well. And then if you're a regular SFSP sponsor, and make sure to print your regular SFSP RFP claims for school year 18-19 and 19-20 as well. And then if you participate in the fresh fruit and vegetable program, those are also separate claims that need to be submitted, printed and submitted. Back on the budget section, I said that there was a link to get that USDA foods information. So we want you to include the USDA foods entitlement allocations and usage for school year 19-20 and school year 20-21. And it can be found by going to this website, and it will be found under the entitlement tab there. Chart 7 is your school calendar for 21-22, and we know that you might not have that finalized, so a draft form is sufficient there. In chart 8 is the designation of program expenses and duties. This chart is important, as you should mark for each item if it will be an SFA expense or duty or a food service management expense or duty. We have kind of pre-marked some suggested answers here for you, and you can change them if you need to, or if after talking to us we decide that it needs to be changed. But I did want to point out under the equipment and facilities section, please make sure that in your version, the replacement of expendable minor equipment is marked as a FSMC expense. In a fixed price contract, USDA does not allow cost reimbursable pieces inside of a fixed price contract. So expenses for small wares and other things can't be billed back to the district by the FSMC, and we had seen that in the past. So please update that in your RFPs to mark the food service management company for replacement of expendable minor equipment. Point of sale accountability, make sure to mark if it's a FSMC duty or if you as a school will continue to do the point of sale. And then the record supporting the claim for reimbursement really is probably both the FSMC and the SFA, since you would be responsible for providing those upon a review. The last exhibit I have here is on page 81, Exhibit F. Exhibit F is your chance to ask for anything that was not included in the RFP. And if you want to provide any additional information or clarifications, you can do that here as well. We have provided several ideas here for you. You can mark any or all of these that you see fit for your school and your program. You can also add your own up there in those boxes. So for example, maybe you want to specify a preference for scratch cooking, or you are willing to accept a shared food service director, but you want to indicate how many days you would like them to be on site. So in our example, we said the shared food service director is on site 3 days per week. You want all these type of things to be in writing so that it is included as part of your contract. So just important to make sure that anything extra that you want, that you do request here in Exhibit F. And we just went through and marked, almost a lot of schools mark, several of these, almost all of them. So I think that is all for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Sean to talk about Exhibit G.
My pleasure. Here. Okay. Exhibit G are just all of the laws that have to be included in the RFP document that the food service management company must comply with. And so this section really deals with that. And as we scroll on down, Allie, keep going. And then on this page, and I don't have the page number with me, page 85, if you go on back up, it is the food service management company's responsibility to sign the lobbying certificate independent price guarantee along with the district's signature when the proposal is accepted by the district. Certification regarding debarment, suspension. Once again, I said we included that information when we talked about checking the excluded parties list. There's a certificate the food service management company has to sign, and it's part of the contract then. So these are all just forms that the company has to provide when their proposal is submitted. So moving on down, I want to talk about the district's responsibility, and that is this section. And these are all tasks that cannot be delegated to the food service management company. Once again, I need to emphasize that the SFA or district has an agreement with the Nebraska Department of Education Nutrition Services to ensure that the USDA regulations are met and abided by. And so this requires that the district sign off that they realize that, and that that the agreement is, their agreement is with our office, and then the district's agreement is with the food service management company. So once again, more exhibits, and if we just arrow on down, Allie, I had taken some of this out, but I don't think we pulled up the most current version. And I apologize, this probably is making you all very dizzy. This is a section that has to be signed by the district, requires a district independent price determination. Once again, that comes in with the proposal for our final review. I want to talk about the award criteria. We've included a scoring sheet for you where your committee members, remember when we talked about who should be on the committee, each committee member needs to complete their own independent evaluation of the proposals and score those proposals based on the award criteria and the points assigned in the RFP, and that we ask that these forms are submitted to our office along with a summary form where the determination is made on what company that the committee has, total number of committee members have awarded for each company. And we want to just make sure that you've abided by the award criteria and the points that you have assigned, and that the proposal is awarded to the company receiving the most points. Once again, page 96 and 97 are the companies that currently operate in Nebraska, and that list includes what districts those companies operate in, as well as the initial year of their contract. Professional standards, USDA has implemented professional standards for food service directors and food service staff. And those standards include hiring standards for food service directors, as well as number of continuing education training hours for directors and food service staff. So that's part of the contract. And then we've included just a sample invoice of what needs be submitted from the company, and that is part of the proposal, is that they submit what their invoice looks like, because monitoring the food service contract is utmost important. You are going to be receiving a monthly invoice, and you must be able to identify every cost that is paid from the school meals account. And so we've just included an example. And as you arrow down, I think that we're about done with this part. And Allie, are you ready to switch over to the PowerPoint and talk about what that virtual pre-proposal meeting needs to look like?
Yes. Give me 1 second. We're going to move on to the last section. This is the last section before our question and answer.
I'll look in the chat while you're doing that and see if there's anything I can answer right now. Dr. Hasty, I sent you a response to your chat. Yes, you do have to rebid this year. I apologize for not having you on the list of schools on the slide, but yes, it is your year to rebid. And Allie, it looks like she has pulled up the PowerPoint.
Okay, like I mentioned, this is the last section of our session before the question and answers. So we're going to talk about conducting the pre-proposal meeting virtually. When you're doing this, it needs to be scheduled for 10 to 14 days after notification appears in the Omaha World Herald, and email notification is sent to food service management companies operating or expressing interest in operating in Nebraska. Again, Sean just showed you this list can be found on page 96 and 97 of the RFP. And another reminder is that NDE does need a copy of this newspaper notification as well. A sample notification is also included in the RFP that was on page 2 that Sean just reviewed. So I have it here again as a reminder. Food service management companies should request the RFP, as not all food service management companies may be interested in receiving the RFP. When RFP is requested, include the virtual meeting link information, and for safety reasons, due to COVID, all pre-proposal meetings must be conducted virtually this year. No private tour requests after the pre-proposal virtual meeting is held. If you get a request from a food service management company for an in-person meeting, those requests cannot be granted this year. Have a system in place to record who is in attendance for the pre-proposal meeting. All food service management company questions must be submitted in writing. All questions will be answered in writing and sent to all food service management companies that attend the virtual pre-proposal meeting. If you have questions asked during the pre-proposal meeting, they should be written down and answered in a written communication. But if you do choose to answer questions, be sure to document the question and answer. We suggest not answering if you are unsure of the answer. And it is okay to mention that no questions can be asked during this meeting, but instead submitted in writing. So now we're going to talk a little bit about having a video tour or a picture slideshow available. In a normal year, as mentioned, the companies would be on site to view the operations. With that not happening this year, you could use your phone to take a video, or you could create a picture slideshow to help draw that picture. The food service management company should have the opportunity to view meal service at feeding sites that include pre-K, K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Also include alternative feeding locations If doing a video, move slowly so that the food service management company can see everything. And if possible, narrate the video and explain the meal service line flow. Make sure students are not included in the pictures or videos without prior release. And another reminder to include your completed equipment inventory list by feeding site as an attachment to the RFP. That was sent out with the reminders and the RFP copy. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to include in your video or picture slideshow. The food service management companies are looking to understand the flow of operations in the kitchen, along with collecting any details that are helpful when running your particular establishment. So provide as many details to them as you can, and this will help determine if their program fits your needs. In my past experience working for a management company and attending these meetings, I can tell you this was a determining factor to help us prepare a solid proposal. So any missing details could cause more questions to come to you later. And if something gets missed, that could have an effect on the program results. So I've included some slides and pictures of examples for you to prepare your video and pictures. Include things like the dining room area or alternative feeding areas, a la carte racks, areas of a la carte sales, school stores, any food bars, specialty bars, or condiment bars you may have, and of course the serving line. And again, if you're doing the video, narrating the service line on how the students come in and go out of the line is super helpful. Include the point of sale or cashier stations, milk coolers, drink coolers, and of course in the kitchen include any large equipment such as ovens, steamers, holding or proof units, ranges. Include walk-in freezers and refrigerators and reach-in freezer and refrigerators, your dry storage area, and your dish rooms. The details really matter when creating these videos and picture slideshows. And that is all that I have. Sean and Erica, if you had anything else to add to this section, otherwise we can move on to the question and answers.
There was a question in the chat in regard to, I can't remember it right now and I don't have the chat. I'll pull it up. It was a very good question about what to show. If we have several buildings and serving sites, how many sites should we try to show on the virtual tour? And there may be concerns with videotaping students and having that out there virtually. I am curious how we should handle this. And as Allie mentioned, you should at least have a slideshow or video that includes an elementary, a middle school, high school, and any alternative feeding sites. And with that, if you have like a central kitchen where food is delivered and it's sent out to, let's say my middle school is my central kitchen and food is prepared there and sent to the elementary, that would be definitely the middle school that should be included in the slideshow or video, and an explanation that that is a production kitchen. But you have provided that in one of the charts already, so that, and identify what buildings in your video or slideshow so that they know what building you're showing the pictures of. And then videotaping students. That is definitely something that is a concern, that the video should not show students. If you have signed releases that the students can be videotaped, great. But if not, then you could have an adult person go through the line and say, you know, how the line flows. It doesn't have to include students, but companies do want to see the flow of the food service line from when the students enter the serving area or how they enter even into the lunchroom, and then how do they proceed through the point of service or the cashiering stations.
I have a question. We are, like, our preschool is being moved into our elementary for next year. And do I go ahead and video the preschool?
So they will be moving into your elementary. Will they be eating in a classroom? Or will they be going through the serving line with K through 5 or K through 8?
We're trying to still figure that out.
Well, that's kind of important to understand what the plan is, because if they are eating in the classroom, they will need to follow the Child and Adult Care Food Program meal pattern. If they are commingled with K through 5, then they would follow the school meals meal pattern.
Okay.
But, you know, is this Jennifer?
Yes.
Jennifer, we'll help you create that picture in the RFP. So it would be nice to know what the plan is. In fact, it's kind of important to know what the plan is. And I know it's pretty early.
We just started building.
Just started building.
Yeah, we're adding on to our elementary.
Okay. Well, that can certainly also, if the plan is unknown in the RFP, it could certainly be addressed in the question and answers that are sent out to all food service management companies that attend the pre-proposal meeting.
Okay.
So that would buy some more time.
So go ahead and video the preschool or not?
I would not, because it's changing.
Okay.
Okay. What other questions do we have here? Let's look through the chat. David asks, on Exhibit C, we don't have access to previous years through Power School. If we have total amounts, but not amounts broken down by breakfast, lunch, and a la carte, can we estimate the breakdown if the total is accurate? Well, if you don't have the records, that's what you will have to do. Are they recorded anywhere? And
yeah, this is David. Can you hear me?
yes, perfectly.
So yeah, we've on our Power School, apparently that doesn't save from year to year. And so as we're trying to find those breakdowns, we're not sure where to look. So we've got the totals just fine. We just didn't know if we should make an estimate on those, breakfast, lunch, and so on, or how important that is that we have that. It's probably, that information is probably somewhere. I'm just not sure how to get it.
Okay. Completely understand. And you've reached out to Power School and they've told you it's not available anywhere?
Yes.
Okay. For any of our other districts that are on this call, have you had any success with getting that information?
Norfolk is not Power School, is Infinite Campus. But I always archive the end of the year data in a separate file because similar thing. Or just an idea, you could access previous year claims, which would already be divided out by facility to get your totals.
Okay.
Yeah, and that information has to be submitted with the RFP anyway, the claims for reimbursement. I think we're talking about for paid students. and reduce students, the payments that are received. So we'll work with you on trying to create the most accurate picture as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Your
You bet.
audit may also have that detail as well.
Thank you. As I look through some more of the questions, I want to see if anything. We haven't asked, and now would be a good time to unmute and ask your questions.
Sean, this is Bill Robinson in Norfolk.
Sure.
I just wanted to share that once again, you're very organized on just complex topics, especially with COVID. So a lot of us appreciate that with the movement we've made with how we feed students with the free program through summer feeding and all that. So just sharing that with you. The question is the slideshow that we just saw here, the piece that you went through on that PDF with that RFP. If we email you, could we get that? Those are very helpful as we're redoing or doing our RFPs to go to bid. Is that a possibility?
Of course. Thank you for asking. We can certainly do that, and we can certainly send it to the group that was on this Zoom today. More than happy to do that. And just keep in mind, it's just all make believe. And we just wanted examples for the presentation, but if you find it helpful, we certainly can send it.
Yes, it's great. The way, your examples that, some of this you don't think about on a daily basis, and it just at least in my mind, oh, yep, I know exactly what they're talking about here with this example. And I think it's just extremely helpful. So if you would send that to the group, much appreciated.
Consider it done. Okay. Anything else from the group? I know we've kept you for 2 hours, and I apologize for the length of our presentation today. But I think, as Mr. Robinson said, this is pretty complex, and it's even more complex when we put the COVID factor into it. And that is why the RFP definitely looks a little different this year than it would during a normal year, even though we've revised it. But we are certainly asking for more information this year to try and create that picture of your district so that companies can make an informed proposal. So,
Donna, could you include the latest RFP that we're to work with as well? I know you've sent that out on and off. I just want to make sure I'm working with that latest copy. So,
of course, it has the 12/20 date at the top, and we will include it in the email that we send.
All right. Thanks again.
You bet. Any other questions in the last minute that we can answer for you? Please unmute. As my computer clicks to 12, once it clicks to 12, we will be signing off. And just once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you.